Eli Zion ve'oreho kemo v'shol b'tzireho v'chilesu lo chakurasak al bo al neyureho Alei Amon Asher Nutash Biashmason Adoreho Ve'al Bias Mecharfei Kel Besoch Mikdash Chatoreho Alei Golus Meshar Seikel Neim Meshir Zemoreo Ve'al Domon Asher Shufach Kemo Mei Yoreho Alei Hegyon Micholeho Asher Domon Bioreho Ve'al Voad Asher Shomam Uvitul Sanhedreho Alei Zimchei Semideho Ufil Yotnei Bechoreho Ve'al Chilul Kelei Heichol Umizbeach Kitoreho Alei Tapei Milocheho B'nei David Gevireho Ve'al Yofyo Asher Choshach Be'esoru Kisoreho Be'esoru Kisoreho
My name is Rabbi Ron Goldberg. I'm the campus rabbi here at the Eisenberg Village of the Los Angeles Jewish Home. We're gathering today for the observance of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is, of course, the 9th day of Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. It's a day of national mourning throughout the Jewish world, and indeed it's also a fast day in many communities still. We remember this day calamities and disasters that befell the Jewish people, starting with the destruction of the first and second temples. In 586 BCE, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar destroy the first temple and take the people into exile in Babylon. And from there, of course, we get the famous verse, "There by the waters of Babylon we sat and we wept when we remember Zion." In 70 CE, the Romans under Titus destroy utterly the second temple. It's a complete disaster for the Jewish people. The political state is destroyed. The national state is destroyed. The center of the Jewish universe, the temple, is destroyed. Tens of thousands are killed. Tens of thousands are taken into slavery. And thousands more go into exile. And throughout history, this 9th day of Av continues to be a day of national mourning and calamity. The expulsion from Spain occurs on Tisha B'Av. The orders expelling the Jews from France and England occur on Tisha B'Av. Even into our modern times, we find the Crusades begin with the destruction of the Jewish community in the Rhineland on Tisha B'Av. More recently, World War I begins on Tisha B'Av with Germany's entering into the fighting, and that leads to upheaval in Europe of the Jewish community that culminates, sadly, with the Shoah, the destruction of the Jews of Europe. Finally, even in South America, we discovered that the bombing in Buenos Aires in 1992 was on Tisha B'Av. In our modern times, there's a question of why do we still observe this day of national mourning? I mean, after all, we have the temple, we have a united Jerusalem, we have a Jewish state of Israel, we have the Israeli flag proudly flying for 72 years. Why do we still observe this day of disaster? And interestingly enough, the best answer I've ever heard came from Ernie Bronstein of blessed memory, the former president of our Holocaust survivors group here. He had a theme that he taught me over and over again. He said, let their memories not be forgotten. That if we forget, if we ignore, if we put aside history, it's not that we're bound to repeat it, it's that we're making it as if history didn't matter, as if their lives didn't matter, as if we have nothing. It became nothing. And the more I've thought about what Ernie taught me, the more I've decided he's right. We remember these calamities, we remember these disasters because they matter. We need to remember disaster so that we can appreciate and value what we have today. A united Jerusalem, a Jewish state, living in a world where we don't face that type of disaster. My friends, please join me as we observe the holiday of Tisha B'Av today.
Thank you, Rabbi Ron. You know, our ancestors tried to find a reason, some sense, some meaning in the destruction of the Second Temple. And on the one hand, the theology that they developed is a kind of bad theology from my point of view, because they thought that the temple was destroyed as a punishment from God. I think and I hope that as 21st century folks looking at anything bad that happens to us, either personally or as a community, that sometimes bad things just happen. It's not that God is a punishing God. I like to think of God as a good and loving God who's there for us during hard times. On the other hand, our ancestors blamed the destruction of the temple on what they called sinat chinam. That translates as senseless hatred. What they noticed was that there was infighting among the Jewish people, that we were pointing fingers at each other, that we weren't getting along, but we were harsh and intolerant. And so while I don't appreciate this notion of a punishing kind of destruction of the temple, I do appreciate their condemnation of senseless hatred. We can learn about that a lot today. Sometimes there's hate just for its own sake, when there could instead be love, unity, and harmony.
Reading of Eicha. Eicha is the book of Lamentations. To lament something means to mourn, to grieve for it deeply with great passion. As my mother would say, to feel it in your kishkas, deep in your gut. And as we read Lamentations, we read the book of Eicha, the trope, the nigun, the melody that's used is more of a funeral dirge, more of a very sad procession, so we can internalize the grief and mourning that goes with the remembering the destruction of the temple. My friends, we begin with the reading in Hebrew of Eicha, to be followed by some reading in English by our residents here at Eisenberg Village.
Eicha yashva vadad hayira bat yam hayta kiamana rabati vagoyim sarati bamdinot hayta lamas bachotiv ke balayla bedimata alechaya ein la menachem mikol ahaveha koreha bagduva hayula leoivim galta yuda meoni umerov avoda hi ashva vagoyim lo matza manoach korot feha yisiguha bein hamitzarim Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva Chadesh yameina kekedem.
My friends, we've heard the reading of Eicha in Hebrew with its mournful dirge. Now, with the help of our residents here at Eisenberg Village, we're going to read part of it in English. My thanks in advance to Judith Caron, Peter Lister, Nyla Lyon, and Danny Rosen. Judith?
Thank you, Rabbi. Oh, how has the city that was once so populous remained lonely? She has become like a widow. She that was great among the nations, a princess among the provinces, has become tributary. She weeps, yea, she weeps in the night, and her tears are on her cheek. She has no comforter among all her lovers. All her friends betrayed her. They have become her enemies.
Judah went into exile because of affliction and great servitude. She settled among the nations, found no rest. All her pursuers overtook her between the boundaries. The roads of Zion are mournful because no one comes to the appointed season. All her gates are desolate. Her priests moan, her maidens grieve, while she herself suffers bitterly.
Become the head. Her enemies are at ease. For the Lord has afflicted her because of the multitude of her sins. Her young children went into captivity before the enemy. And gone is from the daughter of Zion all her splendor. Her princes were like harts who did not find pasture, and they departed without strength before their pursuer.
Jerusalem recalls the days of her poverty and her miseries and all her precious things that were from days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the adversary, and there was none to help her. The enemies gazed, gloating on her desolation. Restore us to you, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old.
Thank you to Judith and Peter and Nyla and Danny for those beautiful readings. When I think of Tisha B'Av, I think about our relationship to Jerusalem today in the 21st century as similar to or contrasted with how our ancestors perceived Jerusalem. The modern musician Sam Glazier wrote a beautiful song called Eicha, which is the Book of Lamentations. And I want to show you this video that captures paintings, artistic drawings, and also modern photographs of Jerusalem then and now.
Like a widow, the city sits alone. No more children, no more pilgrims on the road, looking for the place called the joy of all the earth. Perfect in her beauty, she lies down in ashes and dust. Eicha, Eicha. No more laughter, no more cheer, no more song. We are strangers with no place to belong, driven into darkness of desperate slavery. How long can the night carry on? Echa, Echa, Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, I can hear you weep. When you're broken, I am incomplete. Oh, how much longer will we wander, chased by rustling leaves? God in heaven, lay me down to sleep. שבחי חמיים תוכה Like a widow, the city shines no more. Still we fast, still we mourn on the floor, waiting for the day that all people live in peace, praying for the light of the dawn. Echa, Echa,
Wasn't that beautiful? It is interesting to think about what Jerusalem meant to our ancestors and how it's different from what it means to us today. For our ancestors, Jerusalem was the center of Jewish life. Remember, this was before the advent of the synagogue. There weren't different places of worship all over. Rather, there was one centralized Judaism where everyone would go to the temple up on that mount in the holy city, and in those days offered sacrifices and donations to the Kohanim because they believed that that's what God wanted. That was how they said thank you to God. That was how they said I'm sorry to God. That was how they celebrated their holidays. Today, of course, we do not offer sacrifices in the temple anymore. Rather, we have synagogues, but Jerusalem remains the center of the Jewish people. And for those of you who have either dreamt of going to the Western Wall or who have been there, remember it's no longer called the Wailing Wall because we're allowed to go. It's the Western Wall, and it's the Western retaining wall of where that ancient temple originally stood. Deeply meaningful to us today. I also wanted to share with you that in addition to the fact that I lived in Israel twice, and particularly I lived in Jerusalem twice, once for about a year and once for about 9 months, I also used to lead a lot of tours to Israel. I called them intergenerational trips, where there'd be grandparents, parents, and even children, and sometimes the children would have a bar bat mitzvah there in Israel. When I used to bring those trips, I enjoyed sharing one of my favorite modern Israeli poems written by Yehuda Amichai, and he directs his poetry to tourists. So I want you to think about his clever and even funny at times words, but deeply meaningful. Tourists by Yehuda Amichai. Visits of condolence is all we get from them. They squat at the Holocaust Memorial, they put on grave faces at the Wailing Wall, and they laugh behind heavy curtains in their hotels. They have their pictures taken together with our famous dead at Rachel's tomb and Herzl's tomb, and on the top of Ammunition Hill. They weep over our sweet boys, and they lust over our tough girls, and hang up their underwear to dry quickly in cool blue bathrooms. Once, I sat on the steps by a gate at David's tower. I placed my 2 heavy baskets at my side. A group of tourists was standing around their guide, and I became their target marker. You see that man with the baskets? Just right of his head, there's an arch from the Roman period, just right of his head. But he's moving. I said to myself, redemption will come only if their guide tells them, you see that arch from the Roman period? It's not important. But next to it, left and down a bit, there sits a man who's bought fruit and vegetables for his family. Indeed, for us, Israel today, it might feel far away, but it's the center and heart of the Jewish people. Sometimes I think of Israel as the front lines of the Jewish people. And remember that our brothers and sisters there don't only fight in the military to protect us, but they also live ordinary lives. They go to work, they buy fruit and vegetables for their family, they celebrate celebrations, they weep when difficult things happen, just as we do. And most important, they love love, just like we love love. Finally, I want to share something that is really unique. One of the greatest Israeli songwriters was named Naomi Shemer, and she wrote the famous song, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem of Gold, after Israel and Jerusalem became unified following the 1967 war. Well, here is a gorgeous rendition of Jerusalem of Gold, of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, by a whole bunch of incredibly and beautifully talented women cantors from different places in the country and even the world. Let's take a listen.
אוויר הרים צלול
Wasn't that gorgeous? This holiday of remembering the destruction of the temple, some might say, what's the purpose of it now that we have Israel rebuilt ever since 1948? But Tisha B'Av is important to acknowledge our ancient connection and tie to the Holy Land, which till today some people question, and to remember how fortunate we are that ever since 1948, our homeland is back. And anytime a Jewish person wants to go home, that is to the land of Israel, they can. And so it's no surprise that the founders of Israel wrote Hatikvah, the Jewish Israeli national anthem, to mean Hatikvah, the hope, because the Jewish people never give up hope. And so we're going to conclude our Tisha B'Av commemoration with the singing of Hatikvah. I hope that you will join and sing along, and I wish you a fine day.